Hey everybody, I'm going to take just a minute before we kick off officially and welcome you all as people trickle in. Stacy was saying right before we started two things I want to re-highlight to the group. One, we have a Women in FinOps channel that is started off that Dina is spearheading, so check that out if you're interested. The other thing is we're about to pass 1,000 certified FinOps practitioners who get this fancy badge, if you can see here on the screen. It looks something like this. I'm not gonna lie, I am not certified yet, which is sort of embarrassing. And I had a really good reason. I didn't do it because I knew all the questions. But then I realized Rob and Stacy actually redid all the questions recently. So I think it's time for me to certify. So one of you should go be the 1,000 certified practitioner before me, because it's gonna be really awkward if I win that. All right, well, let's kick off. Welcome to the first official October 2021 FinOps Summit. We are glad to be back. I thought a lot about what to talk about at today's summit as I got up way too early this morning, and I was reminded that my job is really to come back as executive director of the foundation to talk about our mission. And there's a bunch of words on this slide that talk about all the things we do, but our mission really is about the people, right? So all of you here, folks in the community, we're here to advance your careers. I've never worked in a role before where my customer was not a company. My customer is the individuals. And to highlight that, this is a screenshot from one of the working groups that was happening the last few weeks. This is the Reducing Waste Working Group. And I want to say what you're going to see today, the summits, if you haven't been before, this is different than a webinar that you typically go to where people do some prep calls and throw it together. This is a collection of hundreds of different people working together to put together content. So for example, in the last few weeks alone and months, all of these people have contributed to the content that you're going to see today. Working groups coming together to essentially put together playbooks, conversations, all these areas. I want to give a shout out here actually because this person is not going to be talking on the call to Kenny Shepard. So Kenny from State Farm actually went and contributed on his own an entirely new capability to the FinOps framework. So thank you, Kenny, for that contribution, and for the rest of you who are all going to be highlighted here shortly. Now, how do we as the FinOps Foundation invest in people? Well, we've got two groups: governing board, which I work for and the FinOps Foundation staff work for. This is the group that controls the sort of money and strategy. And then we've got the Technical Advisory Council, which is an independent body of elected and appointed folks who vote on best practices. And behind those folks is a huge community now. A year ago, we had no vendors in the community when we joined the Linux Foundation in July. Now we've got almost 50 focused on don't pitch, contribute, share. We've got 9 premier members: Cloud Health, Google Cloud, SADA, Deloitte, Accenture, Verticent, Apptio Cloudability, McKinsey, and NordCloud, IBM company. Those last 3 are brand new since our last summit. We're going to hear a little bit from one of them today as we space that out. And all these folks are here to essentially support this community of 4,400 practitioners. So again, as I mentioned, I'm not certified, so I'll do my plug here in this realm because this is our other source of revenue. This is really important for us to get people certified because it helps us develop more programs. Rob and Stacy and a crew are building a FinOps certified professional program, a FinOps for engineers, etc. So as that money comes together from different sources, this group, the governing board, this group of really great people, see the theme here, practitioners like Jen Hayes, who's our chair, cloud folks like Abuna from Google, platform folks like Deb from Cloud Health and Eugene from Apptio, who we're going to hear from shortly here as part of the newest premier member, and all the great consultants like Mike and Rakinder and my other Michael from Verticent and Accenture and Deloitte. They come together to figure out how we can essentially support this community in different ways. Now, this group has no votes, the previous group, on the technical best practices. This group is a separate group that gets to say, what do we put in the FinOps framework? It's made up of tech unicorns like Atlassian. It's made up of the government. It's made up of older enterprises like Nationwide. Spotify's on here, as well as clouds, as well as technology vendors, to make sure the best practices we're publishing occur naturally and align to the best practices we're seeing out there. Behind all those people is the FinOps Foundation staff, and this is where we work. And I want to highlight there's a hole here. We have an opening, a new full-time role that we opened yesterday, day before maybe, Director of Community. If you want to join us and help spread the word, please come do that. And here's my marketing not approved slide. I wanted to unveil something I put together yesterday. Apologies for the bad graphics. The FinOps solar system. And the FinOps solar system is all the things that we do, but at the center of it is the FinOps framework. And we're going to turn this into a FinOps drinking game. Every time JR says framework, anybody else take a drink, because the framework is at the center of everything we do. Not only does it feed everything we do, but it also takes inputs from everything we do. And we're going to be talking about that a lot today. So we're going to get into the content here quickly, but one of the things that's been coming up a lot in the last month or so, or really, honestly, since I've been in this space like 9-10 years now, is what the bleep is FinOps anyway? Like really, what is it? And the first time I started talking about it in 2016, I totally stole a definition from Gene Kim, the DevOps guy, and basically swapped out some words and put in FinOps and cloud and finance and yada, yada, yada. But the thing I hated about this definition in hindsight is that you use the word movement. This is a professional movement. And it's come up a lot. Well, what is it really? Is it a movement? A year or so later, Mark Schwartz from AWS, enterprise strategy guy there, wrote this great post in late 2018 and called it an idea that was all about financial accountability with autonomous team delivery. He wrote a great article. You should read this if you haven't. But it wasn't exactly something you could put on a slide or you could put into a Wikipedia article. A year after that, Mike Fuller and I spent a bunch of time when we were putting together the book interviewing folks, and we came out with a bunch of words, 250 pages of trying to describe what it is. But the thing that stood out, and I took a photo of this the other day, is at its core, FinOps is a cultural practice. And I think that may be the most important part of the whole thing, and I think that's the closest. So in the spirit of encouraging contribution and people getting involved, we need your help. And I want you to be thinking about this through the whole session today. About 10 different folks, shout outs to Rob Martin, who did a lot of work on this, to Anders Hogman, who contributed a great book reference, as he usually does, to the Infinite Game, to Eric Lamb from Google, who wrote a good definition of it, to Kenneth from King. All these folks contributed on Slack to this now evolving definition that's nowhere near done. This is in a Google Doc. It's available on Slack. If you want to contribute, please jump in and do this. We want to codify a definition that we, again, bring back to the Technical Advisory Council based on the community to share this with. So as you're going through the presentations today, remember all the work that gone into it, but also think about how you can get plugged in and involved as an individual to be a part of this awesome community. And so with that, I will stop my fancy graphics and I will switch over to a regular screen share here. Remind me and everybody else to take a deep breath, and let's get started with the content. So here's we do one ad every time we do this. We ask not to do sales pitches, but every time we have a new Premier member, we give them an ad. And so I'm excited to announce this month's new Premier member, and leading the charge with our 9 years in FinOps talk is Apptio Cloudability. They recently moved up to the Premier level to double down on investment in this community. And very excited to be joined by two folks, Eugene Kvostov, who recently joined our board, who's head of product engineering there for the cloud products, and also Jason Fuller, who's really the star of this show. I think he's a long-term customer of theirs. And Jason, I hope you're on the line. We didn't double check. I think you've been in this longer than anybody else I know. I first talked to you in 2012. You called me out of the blue. I was in Texas, and you were like starting a cloud practice and trying to figure out how to allocate the costs. Are you there? Did you join us?
Yep. Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm here. No,
Well,
thank you, JR. It's been a long time.
Yeah, you too. I want to highlight before I pass it to you guys also, Jason got in on this cloud thing early. Like, look at this resume. 2011, head of cloud service delivery. He's been on the customer advisory board in AWS since 2016. So excited to have you here. And Eugene, I mean, before you, I know you were at Apptio, you were building all this stuff at AWS. So why don't you gentlemen take a minute to introduce yourselves and let's hear the story.
Absolutely. Thanks, JR. I'll let Eugene go first. He's got the ad for today. He's come prepared for Apptio.
As prepared as I can be. Thanks, JR. Thanks, Jason. And thanks, everybody, for listening to us for a few minutes here. As JR mentioned, I'm very excited to join the call today and be joined by Jason. He's certainly well positioned to share his learnings and advice with the group. I won't go through all of his experience and accolades. I'm sure he'll do that himself in a bit. But real quick, little background on myself for those that don't know me, although I do know many of you. I joined Apptio in late 2019, actually following the acquisition of Cloudability. After spending a little over 3 years at AWS, building the cloud cost management tools there. That's actually where I first met Jason. If you ever want to be on a hot seat, talk to Jason when you discover, or he discovers a bug in the cost and usage report that's impacting his ability to do his job. So that was a really exciting time. Moved over to Apptio, and then shortly thereafter joined the FinOps Technical Advisory Council. And most recently, as Jared mentioned, now excited to join the governing board. and really engage deeper with this community as myself and my team continue to build out and innovate through the Cloudability suite of products. We're really guided by that pursuit to simplify cloud cost management and allow you to put FinOps into practice much faster and much easier. And like Jason, and I know his team has the same commitment, we're really excited to extend our commitment here to the foundation. But enough about me. Let's get to the main attraction here. Jason, it's good to be sharing the stage with you again, at least virtually for now. In addition to kind of giving a quick intro of yourself, I'd love to start at the beginning of your FinOps journey, which is going on the better part of a decade here. You've talked a lot about the phases, right? The framework of crawling, walking, and running as a useful way to approach FinOps, right? You can't just kind of get started and fly right away. But what are some of those tactics and processes and really strategies that you and your team use to start crawling?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you know, I feel like I'm amongst friends, you know, 367 people here in the participants list, because unlike my college professor who kind of looked at me sideways when I said I want to do a double major in economics and computer science, everyone here gets it, right? It comes down to that, you know, that level of technical know-how as well as that level of kind of simple supply and demand. So, you know, I think the walk is important, you know, no pun intended. You know, you have to crawl, then you walk, then you run, but it is a journey. And I think for a lot of companies who are starting in cloud today, it's kind of, okay, you're all at the starting line. What are you going to do today? And I mean, the data and the tools and the abilities of everybody in 2021 are so much better. Having FinOps Foundation around to help with training, help with understanding, having partners like FTO around to help with tooling. These didn't exist 10 years ago. You know, we're using Firefox plugins to look at our cloud view because Amazon didn't have a console yet. And so I think my crawling phase was really about data and data architecture. And so every company that I've worked with, every group, you know, whether it's a full-time job or you know, a gig on the side, it's about talking about your kind of who's who in the organization. So I always look for who in finance joins and speaks out, and even calling them out at shows like reInvent, where only 2 guys out of a few thousand raise their hand, very daring individuals who show up at that tech show, or who in the technology sector actually understands, you know, monthly reporting, you know, and things like you say things like paid in arrears, and they don't giggle, you know. So you have to find those folks, because that's the synergy, no doubt about it. So we look for that, and then we build off of that from common language, right? And so I think the FinOps Foundation is great in creating that footprint, that foundation that you work with. But for a long time, it was about explaining a micro reservation or a macro economic or a global, you know, thing. And cloud does that to us because it's absolutely the worst technical term for a movement of any so far. Cloud is looking like the picture I have here on the right. So, but it comes back to data, Eugene, for sure. That's probably the first thing. Locate the data, locate the people who understand the data, and then work up from there.
Got it. Now that makes sense, and there's a lot of data to be had, right? And we try to stress those similar tactics with this community and with our customers, right? Working through tags, but also things that you can't tag, and normalizing your billing data and some of the apples to apples stuff you talked about. In the past, you've also mentioned kind of reading off one sheet of music, right? And I thought that's a really great framework to look at it, and a great foundation to build. But how do you build off of that foundation? How do you get to the walk phase, quote unquote, and start operating and optimizing your cloud costs, and doing so for maximum efficiency?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing when you're Anton's got a phone call he's going to answer. I think when you're dealing with a situation like moving from the crawl to the walk phase, you do have to start singing off that single sheet of music. So look, it's not a new concept. A simple 2x2 on a whiteboard that says, what are the things that are going to be low time but high impact? And we, even in the run phase where we are at Here Technologies, we're still doing these conversations. I came from a meeting just this morning with our chief data officer, talking to her about how is the data ingest across the global cloud footprint, across the global cloud estate, impacting our bottom line, right? Where can we optimize and tune? And as companies start to move into 2021, the way we end up in the state that we're in, things like GDPR, CCPA, SOC 2, FedRAMP, HIPAA, every company is looking to make sure there's a third party signing their we're doing it right card. And that leads to down the hill, if you think of it like the snowball effect, it lands squarely on the feet of the technologists, and the FinOps folks are there to help tell the story. So you got to start telling that story there, Eugene. So like looking here, we took from an approach of 2016, 2017 timeframe. It was right around when I joined Here Technologies. Here Technologies is a giant cloud partner. We have a lot of we have a lot of everything. Let's put it that way. We're in the AWS technology community of top 100 customers. We work with pretty much anybody because ultimately we're about location. So location isn't necessarily a cloud supplier or a region or a country. It's centimeter accurate millisecond response of a platform that enables things like your car to drive automatically. So we have a very high tech product line with very smart people who are writing algorithms for looking around corners and things like this. You have to be able to balance this in your walk approach. So when we showed up, it said, look, you have a lot of stuff in AWS, you have a lot of stuff in these other cloud suppliers. How are you handling that at a fleet level? You get a lot of head scratching, people going, well, my silo does this, their silo does that, we never mix. And the truth is there's a common denominator across that. So once you determine who the right finance person who speaks geek and who the right technologist is that speaks finance, and you get them in a room and start talking about how we start the quick wins to save the company money, you start to build a reputation of somebody who can, visualize beyond the boundary. And so when you start doing this sort of increasing of function, you have to continue to engage both sides. Just yesterday, I was told you're not in finance and you're not in architecture, so I don't know why I have to talk to you. You have to talk to me because I show the CEO the data that says your group is not, spending money appropriately. So there is a little bit of, contention there that can occur, and building a good, solid FinOps practice inside of your organization means you have to be willing to stand next to the bad as much as stand next to the good. So we institute KPIs. We look at things that drive corporate alignment. Yeah, we're going to keep 85% of what I call here micro commitments. These are basically fast follow architectural decisions that we take out of the hands of the engineers and we do on behalf of the company. We institute things like service control policies in AWS or RBAC policies in Azure or blueprints in Azure that give us the ability to lock, the catalog, right? Don't let these be purchased willy-nilly, even though it could be fast and free. Finance works on months, quarters, years. They don't work on microseconds, milliseconds, and second-long billing files, right? So you have to balance some of the common denominator approach when you're in the walk phase. But really enhance your automation and technology. You have to make investments. You have to show savings to get the money to make investments. Then go find the low-hanging fruit you can do with an Excel sheet and a couple of people that have the right control, the right administrative level inside the company. Make that money appear in the right way, and then they will support you, as you go forward in this journey. But Eugene, you have a great, from an Aptio perspective, you also have tooling providers like Aptio who are going to give you a lot more of the, prescriptive step-by-step. And you take a FinOps Foundation training, you take a Cloudability or Aptio standard operating onboarding, and you've almost given yourself the catalyst to get through the crawl and the walk phase once your organization is settled inside of your company.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I know identifying optimization, savings opportunities, turning off idle resources, identifying anomalies, finding the right commitment-based programs, those are things I get asked about a lot. So it's good to hear you dive into those. I often get asked how to save more money on cloud. And while that's good and great, of course, you want to save money. My response, and I think you share the sentiment, is it's not necessarily about just spending less money, but spending the right amount of money for your business, your different business units, products, teams, however you organize it. you need to put those cloud costs and the savings opportunities into the context of your objectives, right? So I know you talked a little bit about how your team has been successful in that regard, and you started to talk about automating a lot of those processes, which is what whenever I've spoken to you and your team, I've always found fascinating, right? The ability to really do this on an event-driven or an automated basis so that you almost allow things to run themselves. Talk a little bit about that and how that's allowed you to evolve to the run, or in your case, maybe even sprint or fly phase, and realize those benefits, and also how you share those in the context of your business. Sherry just mentioned, right, being able to talk across finance and tech rather than directly to execs, but then also getting that exec buy-in. Love to hear more about that. I know the group would as well.
Yeah. I mean, like once you've established the team and you've had, like, let's say the first year inside the practice, you kind of give yourself that first year to challenge some of the status quo, challenge some of the engineering practices, depending on if you're coming into this cloud thing for, like I did at Here Technologies, where it was well established, or where I did at Pegasystems, where it was, the cloud itself was brand new. It depends on kind of where your company is, but in that first year, you're going to want to lock down, like I said, the organization and gather the tooling and make a little bit of a wave, right? Not a big splash, but here's what I'm doing. Like anything in the technology world today, where you can take a practice, do it on pen and paper, move it on to technology, move it to automation, it just enables you to keep the team size fairly small. The last thing you want to do is replicate, say, the old IT model of, parallel growth of cost centers against revenue generating product. You want to be seen as someone in product who helps with building things that help the product teams move faster. So locate some of those things in the product group that they say, oh, yeah, we're scheduling now I'll use a very geeky example, but we're scheduling the GP2 to GP3 migration of EBS volumes in Q3 2022. Well, guys, I can do it, before the end of October. So why don't you let my DevOps team handle that? But it's about access. And so having trust within your organization is super, super important. I live inside of the IT and trust organization, actually, with our FinOps practice. I don't live in the engineering or under the CTO. And so I work closely with our folks in security, work very closely with our folks in GRAC. But everybody works in different, FinOps is in a different place depending on where you are. Some folks I've talked to, it's in their finance work. Some folks it's in their deeper engineering org. It all depends on where the company sees that value proposition that you're posting. But once you've got the right technical people working for you, and for example, people always ask, well, how big is your team? My team's no more than 3 DevOps engineers with a lead. So four technologists. Right. And it hasn't grown past 4 in 5.5 years, because what we do is we establish, what's going to happen. And then it's more about communication, engagement. I tend to do a lot of dog and pony shows. Leader of the FinOps world has to, be out there. I don't get to touch the keys anymore. But some of the automation things we've done, we pull data out of Cloudability. We review it on a per hour basis, and we make judgment calls using an algorithm we wrote. This is an example here. Thank you. So from left to right at the top, we're actually just taking this out. Now, the reason we're taking this out of Cloudability rather than doing in Cloudability is, I think Cloudability, just like AWS or Azure or Google, you have a kind of all development or all possible scenario approach to some of this, where we have very specific use cases. So we have situations where we're putting the entire map on memory, for millisecond response in some of our service layer. So depending on your product, how transactional your product is, your costs will be different, but your actions need to be different too. So if I'm going to take data and go to an engineering team and say, once a day, you're underutilizing this instance, I want you to change it, they're going to say, you measured me at the wrong hour. So we measure constantly. And we created this serverless environment because we obviously can't spend money to save money. We do spend money, but we have to spend it in the right places. This environment costs me single-digit dollars per year to run. This Aurora database is now serverless, has been running for over 3 years, has a track of every single instance, every single RDS instance as well that we've ever said is out of band for its compute, memory, and its IO. I know exactly what's happening in that, and I know via the JIRA tickets we're sending out, whether they're taking action or not. So some will say, well, this looks a lot like the right sizing JIRA connection that Cloudability has. It does. And it was done before that was really live for us. We were doing this in the quiet phase. And, ultimately, it's about then showing cloudability, showing your third-party tooling, helping them along. As Eugene said, we've had many good conversations, but firm conversations about what the data structure needs to look like and how the data needs to come in. And I think it does promote collaboration in the industry. But ultimately, to move fast, you have to build these things, but it comes with good process, good engagement and trust first, technology second.
Yeah, and we do listen to our customers, Jason, so thank you for that.
You do.
In addition to, well, actually, Joe Daly challenged me to keep you on time, so I'm going to try to do that. I have just one more question, so I'm sure you'll be in high demand after this chat and folks know to reach you, but where do you really see FinOps going next in 30 seconds or less?
15 seconds.
15 seconds. If FinOps is all about the data sharing and data visualization and cross-charging, and I would call those all defensive postures, FinOps goes into the offensive next. You start to get given permission to take action much deeper, deleting data, removing things. I mean, yes, we do some of that now, but we do it very kind of safely. I think we become first-class citizens within the organization, and you become like a security team where you're doing the FinOps thing and the security thing first. People in our organization are looking at cost increases by release.
Yep.
So you start to get really deep into that world of the CDCI, in the FinOps when you're flying.
Fantastic. So if
Thanks,
anybody wants
everybody.
to dig in more with Jason, he like literally you could talk to this guy for hours. He'll go super deep. He's in a breakout afterwards. That wasn't a jab, Jason. I mean it. He's in a breakout afterwards to share more stories and talk. So please join. Eugene, any final words from your end?
No, I mean, thank you all very much for listening. Thank you for sharing, Jason. The last kind of plug I'll make is I'm sure I'll see many of you in reInvent come visit us at the Apptio booth. Come to the breakout session. I'm going to be lucky enough to share this stage with Ashley and Jen. Talk about FinOps, talk about some of the new products we have like Cloudability SaaS and Cloudability Total Cost. So I'd be excited to see you there.
Awesome.
Back to you, JR.
Well done,
I think
folks.
we're roughly on time.
Thank you. Awesome. Always good to hear the stories. So one of the things Jason mentioned, and I wanted to ask Jason, maybe I'll do in the breakout, is, how do you get people, when you go to somebody and you say, pay attention to this, and they say, why should I listen to you? And you say, well, because the CEO is going to be mad at you if you don't. This is the perennial problem. How do you get executive support, organizational support behind the practice? Because otherwise you're constantly in reactive mode. So this working group is digging into just that. They've been working on this for a few months. They made some great progress. Excited to pass to our chair, Ashley Ramatko, to show what they've been working on and see some of the deck. Welcome, Ashley.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, I'm really excited to come back. If you guys remember, we were at the summit a couple months ago, and we were kind of telling you everything we were going to do, and then we've really executed on a few really neat things that I want to go over. So, first of all, if you guys don't know, there is two channels. So it's that popular of a topic that we needed two channels. One of them is open kind of to the public, and the other one are folks that have been regularly attending our meetings on Friday. So. When we this first got formed, actually back in 2019, a longtime FinOps practitioner, Patrick Borgen, created this channel with the goal of creating a pitch deck to help persuade stakeholders to invest in FinOps. So all that material is still on the Slack channel, and we've just really iterated on that right now. And so I'm here to kind of show you an update of really where we're at. And so the past 4 months, we've been getting together as a group and really been focusing on further defining, like, how do we talk to and influence the folks that would be our FinOps stakeholders, and how do we get them on board to adopt with us? And so that's really what we've been doing a deeper dive into. So one of the first, I guess, deliverables that we've created is, if you want to go to the next slide, this concept of these type of scorecards. I kind of look at them like almost like a baseball card, right? And so we've created these cards that have a variety of executive and stakeholder personas on them. We're capturing what are their objectives, what are their key metrics that they care about, what are they frustrated about, and how can FinOps help address all of that stuff. And so we're hoping that a FinOps champion would be able to review this material for that persona and figure out how to adapt their presentation to that persona, kind of this whole choose your adventure style story, and really focusing on focusing your messaging around the benefits that persona is interested in. And then these persona cards are now up on the website as of about half an hour ago. So you guys can look at these in a little bit more detail, and we'll be looking for your guys' feedback if we're missing a persona, if there's more updates to be done here. But I'm really excited to kind of get these play deck cards out. And the next thing we dug into was the roadmap. So we also shared a little bit about this at the last summit. Next slide, please. And so the roadmap here is just what is that journey that we would want to be taking that stakeholder through to understand the adoption of FinOps? Like, what does it entail? And this really includes all the initial steps to getting the organization ready, all the way until getting it up and running. And so along with kind of the roadmap, which would be great to present to your executive, we've also kind of broken down each of those phases. Jared, if you want to move to the next step, next slide. And so you can see here for each of the phases that we have: planning, socializing, preparing. We've created what are the exact tasks, what is the socialization effort you want to do in that phase, and ultimately how are you going to launch that practice. And so you want to be able to kind of take these phases and roadmap and also adopt them to what your organization is. And so again, the champion would be able to present this with their case, asking for some type of investment, and be able to really identify to that stakeholder where you are. You know, are you at the very beginning planning phases? Have you already socialized it with your organization and these are the tasks that you're working on now? Or are you already ready to launch and you need to be explaining to your executives what you're going to deliver and therefore the resources you need to deliver that? So again, it's taking the roadmap one step further of showing you exactly what tasks and actions to be working on in those phases. And again, these are also on the website, so you can dig into those a little bit more. And then the other part, if we go to the next slide, is we really wanted to make sure we could take and integrate the map and the personas together. And so we started developing this concept of a Daisy-Racy model, so you could really understand each stakeholder's persona and how they are involved kind of with the roadmap. So there are specific things that we're going to need to ask for: budget, involvement of activities, committees, different type of meetings and comms that need to go out. And so we really want to make sure each executive should know what their responsibilities are, what are the key things they're going to get from FinOps team, and what do we need their help and support propagating throughout the organization. So this material is also posted on the FinOps website, and we feel like this is a good way you can kind of take this and adapt it for your organization for whatever your titles are. But it's very common that people will want to know, especially when you start working with a TVM organization or a FinOps or finance organization or procurement, they're going to want to know what is everybody's roles and responsibilities, and feel like this outlines it really well. Go to the next slide. So what we want you guys to be able to do with this deck is really do this whole choose your own adventure pitch deck. So maybe you have a certain problem that you're trying to solve or a certain opportunity. And so you should be able to take this pitch deck, figure out what persona you're targeting it with. Maybe your persona is finance, and then be able to use the roadmap to adopt the conversation and tell them, here's where we are and here's where I want to get to. And this is the call of action that we need participation from that specific stakeholder. So that's how you will end up using this material to do your pitch. And you can do it for like a really big macro picture, like I want to go out and I want to pitch a FinOps function. I want to pitch a FinOps program for a year, or I've just got this one problem with cross-charging and I want to pitch that to the executives. So you can really adapt it on various levels. So before I turn it over to TJ to kind of go through this, your own adventure, I do want to give a huge thank you to all the participants that have been helping in this working group. This is just a few of them that have been regular, showing up consistently on Friday, about noon my time, but some of them have been coming, late into their evenings. And so it's definitely been a highlight of my week to get together with these folks. And this is my call to all of you guys. If you can join a working group, it's such a good way to meet new people and build relationships. And so I just want to give a really big shout out to all these that have been consistently coming for about 4 months. And while we'll take a pause on this working group now, we're actually really excited to pick it back up in next year and tackle another problem. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to TJ. He's going to walk through a scenario of how he would use this pitch deck and this material that's been developed by the working group. And if you can, please come to the working group. Mike will also be presenting a similar deck in that working group. And I think we'll have it recorded so you can watch it later as well. All right, TJ, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ashley. Appreciate it. So if we can go to the first slide, please. Great. So when we talk about product owner as a persona, and this is the one that I chose because I think it's the non-tech part that sometimes stumps people and how we coordinate and communicate with people. So from a product owner perspective, you ever think of them as a line of business manager in the sense that, they own the P&L, and we have to try to figure out how to help them run their business because that's the question that they often ask me, right? So I'm the cloud business manager at Fox. And we have a number of different product managers on the P&L that report up to the person that is that runs the business unit. And so when we talk about this, the first question I get is, well, my team is mostly engineering. How can you help me, right? And so we go through a couple of different scenarios, and it ends up being a conversation, much like Jason was talking about. It's really about communication. I am kind of the hub between tech and business and finance, and it becomes most of my time is on phone calls, unfortunately, and not doing as much work as I like to do, but I try to squeeze in some, unfortunately, over the weekends. One of the most important things that we look at when we talk about product owner is really forecasting. Forecasting is such an important thing that I don't people realize how important it is. And so when we go through things, yeah, we need to have budget alerts. That's important. Yes, we do have a forecasting modeler that helps us with some of our community usage strategies. Even, we use AWS and GCP to the point where, on BigQuery as a product, as a service, there's a thing called reservations, and you can go through and you can estimate kind of what your reservations are, much like a CUD in GCP or an RI or savings plans in AWS. And so things like that, we have modelers that down to the not just overall spend for service, but for multiple different services. One of the most important things that I put up on the first bullet point was identify cost to serve. You have to change your mindset from optimization, whether you're doing right sizing t-shirts, right, or you're doing modernization or waste elimination. They're looking at a different perspective, right? And we also have to flex to that new perspective as well. So we're going to talk about budgets and actuals and forecasts throughout this conversation, how this really works out. Next slide, thanks. So some of the important objectives that they're looking for is they're looking at what's their year-over-year growth, right? And what's their time to market? How can they increase that? And that goes back to a number of different things. So we're trying to figure out what this really means and try to understand from a product owner's perspective, how can we help them? So we want to be able to help them with some of their frustrations, right? Unpredictable, sometimes chaotic cloud spend. Well, what's the usage? What's the utilization? What's the spend? All those come together in trying to help them understand where they're at and hopefully get a handle on where they're going. Can't predict any costs close enough for new features. That's a big thing that we work with them on quite often, is really looking at new features, new product, which tends to lead itself to new architecture and maybe even new cost structures that we need to help them manage, and then take that to a forecasting model. Now we look at cannot predict how costs will change when they actually launch things. Well, that's the challenge that we have quite often. We're in the middle of next year's fiscal planning. And so you look at different models that we're working with today, and, again, back to forecasting, down to the project or account, down to the resource, down to the unit counts, right? And so we're really trying to get as accurate as we can. We know we'll never get there, but we start with setting that budget. And then as time goes through, we see the actuals, and then we're actually redefining our forecasting also as time goes on. Unit cost becomes a big issue because we manage to that, right? I mean, for us, we're looking at, how do we audit the bill? We found, some interesting things that we didn't really understand happened. Like there's some services that you can invoke in GCP that automatically adds logging, but you don't really know that it does until you actually get the bill. So you start seeing things like that. You go, okay, so they're doing that on your behalf, but you don't want the logging. And so you have to figure out how to turn off the logging and how much did you end up costing you for that automatic logging that you didn't ask for. So things like that are in things you just really need to be able to help them understand what goes with what. And then obviously manage the risk, help them understand how to make better decisions. If it's possible, help them predict a little bit more about their cloud infrastructure as the time goes on, and then make sure they're making good investments. And that's really what we do. We help them understand that process. Next slide, please. So you saw Ashley talk about the roadmap. Even though, you know, we're in between the kind of the walk run phase, you know, this is really important to understand. You know, how do you plan for it? How do you plan for FinOps? All the different people you have to interview and make sure that you're on track for this stuff. Go through on socializing that, you know, now that you understand kind of the requirements of the organization, how do you socialize the benefits of FinOps, and then how do you prepare the organization? You know, once you're really prepared, and, you know, some people can say, well, we're not ever really prepared, let's just do it. Then you go to the launch. And again, all of these require a lot of communication. Again, like Jason was saying, you know, you start talking to people, a lot of one-on-ones happen here from the socialization perspective. And, you know, we were debating on the group whether we should be doing one-to-many or one-to-one socialization. And the answer is yes, you should be doing both. And so how do you then get to that point where you're really understanding what people are asking for and making sure that you're delivering that as part of preparing for the organization? And then once you go to launch, is now, okay, what do we do now at launch, right? Run is I don't want to say it's easier, but it's that hump you have to get over for launch to get to run that really traps a lot of people in not really able to effectively either saving a lot of money, or you end up doing things not quite the right way, right? So really preparing is really key to doing this. You know, we talk a lot about defining tags and labels and creating the taxonomies and metadata. You know, for me, that's a foundational step in really kind of the operational component of FinOps. You don't have to necessarily do it all up front, but you have to have some type of taxonomy that's in place. You really have to understand that. Building a toolboxes, you know, as you saw the different phases, as you go through the crawl, walk, run, you may implement different tools for each of those different phases as well. And then you find yourself that not one tool fits the services that you're consuming. So you have to really look at that as an ongoing project. KPIs, so important. You know, typically we try to answer 4 questions. You know, where are we today? How do we get better? How are we against a KPI? And then are we actually getting better? So, you know, we look at different measurements to help us understand all 4 of those questions. Thresholds, always good to have the right set of thresholds, although they need to be set in coordination with a product owner. If you're going to set budget alerts and different things like that, define and prepare persona-based self-service dashboards. You know, I don't want my team to start answering 1,000 questions from different people. I want everything to be self-serve. I want everything to be automated self-serve. You know, we spend too much time every day answering questions when they could answer it themselves by going to a self-service dashboard. Forecasting model, again, so important. It helps with committed usage modeling as well. If you know your forecast for the next year, you know, you could do an RI for a year or savings plans or a CUD, whatever you want for that year more accurately. And you can define maybe even a higher level of coverage. And so as we go back to so.
Hey, awesome stuff. I was just gonna say, would love to hear more maybe in the breakout if you don't mind.
Sure.
Carry on. I've got a lot of great content, and this is fantastic. So we've got the
no
recording.
worries.
Anybody who wants to continue the conversation, yeah, please jump in that breakout with TJ and also Mike. And Ashley, you want to do final words on this one?
Yeah, like I said before, we are going to kind of pause right now, and then we're going to re-jumpstart things in February and just kind of keep working through the laundry list of things we want to do as this group. And I post this in the thing, but I really want to give a shout out to Mike and Dean from Accenture. They've been huge contributors to this group and really gave us the foundation of that roadmap. And so it's been really nice getting to see the contribution of practitioners and also a group like Accenture come in and have very different perspectives. And we've been able to, you know, drive these huge deliverables. So thank you to everyone that's contributed. And please join if you're interested for the next phase.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, just to highlight, this group has been not only going for a long time, but if you look at the list of contributors, it is long, right? We've got so many fantastic people who contribute to this, both consultants, practitioners, vendors. This is the model we're trying to replicate and do more and more. So please consider joining one of those in the future. Awesome. So when we talk about the framework, Europeans take a drink, Americans have coffee. Right now, the framework is focused on the what. what is FinOps, what are the capabilities, what are the real world stories. The next phase of that is how do we start to do implementation guides? How do you go and do it? What does it look like on a GCP versus an Azure versus an AWS? How do you do it with this provider? You know, we heard about the cloud abilities. How do we do it with a Cloud Health, or how do we do it, you know, with Flexera or any of the other people in the space? And so what we're looking to do next with the breakdown is start to provide playbooks on top of that, that may be vendor focused, or they may be industry focused, financial services. They may be tech unicorn versus all those. So one of the first ones that's come out, wanted to invite Google to share theirs. They've recently baked the FinOps principles into the new cloud architecture framework and launched some white papers here. So I wanted to welcome Pathik and Sam to tell us how they've integrated the framework. And you probably can't unmute yourself, I'm guessing. One second here. Okay, Pathik, it looks like you're unmuted, and Sam should be now too.
There we go, brilliant. Thank you very much, JR. Hi everyone, my name is Sam. I work in Google Cloud as a cost management and FinOps SME in professional services, and joining me as JR said is Pathik, who is also from Google Cloud and leads the cost optimization practice. So yeah, as JR said, we're excited to share a couple of things more on the how in terms of the playbooks that we've been working on over the past couple of months. So the first thing, exactly as JR said, we're going to talk about is this new white paper, FinOps on GCP, this kind of playbook. So Pathik and I both work in professional services, and we are often getting asked by large enterprises, how do I implement FinOps on GCP? You know, you've convinced us it's important, we've read about it, we get it, but how are we actually going to do that? How are we going to make it happen? And we get asked that incredibly broad question. It's obviously very tough because there's just so many things to consider. I think even just looking back over the previous couple of presentations, it's just brought into my mind, there's so many things to consider. And we have to, the challenge for us is how do we present that in a, present that message in a cohesive way that the enterprise is going to buy into, and that allows them to implement FinOps in a sort of gradual, iterative way. And that's here where what we're essentially doing is trying to leverage all of this stuff that the FinOps Foundation is doing, and rather than trying to do our own thing, actually trying to just put a sort of GCP lens and some of our philosophy on cloud transformation, SRE over the top to kind of get that buy-in and that iterative approach. And exactly to that extent, we've kind of written this white paper that basically covers that. It's based on the FinOps Foundation's sort of life cycle that you can see right there in Form, Optimize, and Operate. And it's designed to just act as this playbook for implementing FinOps by combining the sort of GCP tooling and the sort of cost management features with the sort of FinOps best practices and behaviors. So we've defined these kind of FinOps ethics that we think are important when adopting FinOps on GCP, but they're really going to be very common. You're going to recognize them. You can see those ethics in the sort of life cycle stages: allocate, forecast, guardrails, incentivization. Each of those has its own section in the white paper explaining sort of what it is and how you can implement that with GCP tooling. And there's a couple of things we were really aiming for with this white paper. One was we want to make sure it was just as practical as possible, always coming back to how are you going to do it. The second was we want to make it as accessible as possible as well. Make sure that it's not just for finance, not just for FinOps practitioners. It's something that anyone can pick up and really learn and start making some changes within an organization. The second thing was we want to make sure that some of the Google philosophy was in there from our SRE principles. And that's what that green blob, that FinOps culture blob in the middle is. They essentially align to some principles underpin the paper. So for example, one of them is blameless culture. Obviously very key for building out robust and effective systems in app dev, and FinOps is no different. In cloud, someone at some point is probably going to make a spend mistake. They're going to waste some money. Potentially it's going to be very costly. We just really need to make sure there's an open discussion on that mistake and that the organization doesn't make the same mistake again. That's not going to happen if you're throwing blame around. So it's been hugely helpful to have the FinOps framework to actually build on, because it means we can speak a sort of common language of our customers. So when I present this slide to our customers, it's familiar, it has buy-in. They understand what it is because they probably Googled FinOps and found the FinOps Foundation and they've seen this. So it's been very helpful to have this to build on. So please do check it out. It's called Getting Started with FinOps on GCP, free to download, and would really appreciate any feedback you have on it. I think the link has been posted into the chat. Last thing I'll leave you with before I hand over to my colleague Pathik is we have a pre-existing white paper. It's called Maximizing Value with Cloud FinOps. It rolls up those same ethics, but into capabilities instead. So it's a more high-level paper aiming to cover more what FinOps is and how you can look at it in capabilities without necessarily going to the how. So if that's, you know, what you mean, sounds up your street, have a read of that. But sticking with this how theme, sticking with the kind of playbook theme, Pathic's going to now cover how FinOps has been incorporated into the Google Cloud Architecture framework. So I'll hand over to Pathic for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Sam, for the wonderful overview. And on the same theme as Sam mentioned and JR mentioned on the, how, I'll actually take a step back. And, one of the things our customers have asked time and again is, how do we, give us an implementation playbook? How do we build our capabilities across XOps? So think about it as, DevOps, SecOps, FinOps, etc. And our answer to that is Google Cloud Architecture Framework. So we are combining decades of experience, running large-scale applications, gathering feedback from thousands of customers, including FinOps Foundation community. And we have defined 6 different building blocks, which is called pillars, that are critical for organization of any size, regardless of where you are in your cloud journey. And so the next step for us here is to support the XOps cause using this fundamental building blocks. So what I mean by that is cost optimization being a critical capability to strengthen FinOps and what that implementation is going to look like. Let's dive deep, 200, 300, 400 level. Same with security supporting SecOps and operational excellence and reliability supporting DevOps. So think of this as an implementation playbook for developers, architects, and cloud practitioner. With that said, I'll actually just double click into the CO piece. So in this part, we completely redefined what the cost optimization pillar is going to look like. And we took inspiration from our very own FinOps Foundation community and incorporated all aspects of how customers should be thinking about in terms of designing, governing, and optimizing for cloud efficiency. Now, each section is 20 pages long. It could be from a couple pages to 20 pages long, so I'm not going to go into too much details here. But fundamentally, there are 4 key themes that you would see in this document when you come across. One is we start with design principles that can be applied to all cloud, regardless of where you operate. Second is canonical best practices that aligns with one or more design principles. The third piece is design patterns and blueprints to solve a specific business challenge. So in this case, it would be, how do you create a cost optimized archives for your media archives, things of those nature. And then finally, taking it up a notch further and putting together a specialized industry guided path built on top of the foundation blocks. So if we go to the next slide, and my good friend Sam will drop the link shortly. So I highly encourage you all to give it a read, especially if you're designing and implementing your applications on Google Cloud. Share your feedback with us. We actively listen. We would love to hear from you. And yeah, with that said, thank you for the opportunity, and back to you, JR.
Thank you, gentlemen, for all your contributions and work on this. It's great to see it getting out there. Yeah, again, lots of ways to get involved. We're going to be adding this to the framework. Jason's talk earlier will be added to the framework, contribute to those areas that Pathic and Sam mentioned. And of course, there is a Google Cloud room in there. Now, this working group it's not the Google working group, it's the multi-cloud working group. We just focused deeply on Google because a lot of the concepts we had were very misaligned from, say, the AWS concepts. CUDs do not work as RIs, etc. Next up, we're going to be focusing the working group on Azure to make sure we're covering, things like linked accounts versus subscriptions, or how RIs work there, etc. So if you're an Azure shop as well, please put your hand up in the multi-cloud working group to join that. And yeah, thanks again to the group for all the work done so far, especially Kim Weir from Target. I want to give a shout out. She was chairperson of the group, spent a lot of time doing a multi-cloud glossary, which is also on finops.org below the framework. Check it out. Thanks. I don't know if I'm sounding pitchy or just being cute. We'll see. So waste reduction, everyone's favorite topic. We hear it all the time. So one of my favorite things to say, FinOps is not about saving money. It's about making money. Waste reduction, Jason mentioned, it's not just about saving, but saving is a big part of it. Yet in Optimize, we can't ignore waste reduction. It is using less, it is paying less, it is all those things. This is a broad-reaching group that was the last of the working groups we started based on the top challenges from the state of FinOps. If you all remember the data.finops.org that we launched beginning of the year, we asked what are the 7 top challenges. The top one was getting engineers to take action, so we did a working group on that first. This was the last one we haven't done, which was waste reduction. And we asked this group to, we delayed on it, frankly, because it's such a big topic, we didn't know where to start. We asked this group to start first with a definition of what that looked like. And going to pass to Mike Martin from GLG, who's been a big contributor to this. He's got a lot of things to share about the work group's work. Wanted to also give a shout out to Joe Daly, who's not with us today. He's out on a medical leave. He had hoped to be here to share, but Mike gracefully stepped in days before to pick up the talk track. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you for that. So everyone can hear me, I hope. I'm Mike Martin, full-time SRE and part-time FinOps fanatic. The other sharply dressed gentleman here, as JR mentioned, is Joe Daly, our working group's fearless leader and entertainer. Back at the August FinOps Summit, there was a breakout room for reducing waste that sparked interest from a number of FinOps folks, including myself. After about 20 minutes in the breakout room, we realized that there was a whole lot more to unpack. Thus, our Reducing Waste working group was born. The goal of the working group was simple, and that was to define waste. Every Wednesday for the month of, where'd I go? For the month of September, we'd spend about, there were 15 to 20 of us. Oh, I think I'm losing the slides. Oh, we're jumping around. So, 15 to 20 of us would hop on a Zoom where Joe Daly would mostly entertain us, but also get to work on what we today are presenting as our definition of waste. As you could see, it took us a month to distill all of our conversations and bring to you what we agreed upon was our definition of waste. Any usage or cost of resources which provide no value to an organization. So as I read this to you all, I realize it may seem silly that it took a group of 15 people 1 month to come up with 13 words. However, a lot more than a definition came out of this slot, out of this.
So simple is hard, and this is one of the shortest definitions of any of the concepts we have. You saw the 80-word definition of FinOps I put up earlier, so.
Appreciate that. Next slide, please. So in that first meeting, I was personally amazed by not only the FinOps knowledge I was surrounded by, but also the technical cloud knowledge that all the people had that joined the group. It was clear that everyone knew what they were talking about and had no fear in sharing their knowledge and opinions. After the first 45 minutes, again, we realized that a definition was not enough. We needed real-world examples, we needed stories, and it turned out we needed our real-world stories. So what followed was a month of interactions on Zoom, Slack, Google Docs, and Google Sheets to produce what we are proud to introduce today as our Reducing Waste project. So if you go to the next slide, on the screen here is a snippet of what you'll find when navigating to our Reducing Waste project group on the FinOps.org page. Our real-world stories of reducing waste broken out by cloud and an estimate on how much this could save your organization. So we thought it was important to not only define what waste is, but also how to reduce waste in your organization. For example, I share how my organization used AWS Storage Lens to discover multi-part uploads that were literally burning cash each month in S3 costs. I also shared about how my organization migrated from GP2 to GP3 EBS volumes and realized 20% savings, giving us improved performance without interrupting service to users. Next slide, please. So those are my stories, but that I briefly shared. But I'm just going to echo what Ashley said earlier, and none of this would have been possible without the folks that participated. The working group calls and chats contained members that had titles like Director of Cloud Optimization, Financial Analyst, and even engineers. But more importantly, we collectively represented over a dozen companies. I'd like to take a moment to recognize everyone listed here, along with the members of the working group from the Slack channel that took time out of their days to not only come together, but to produce this priceless information. that you could use at your organization today. So thank you all. For me, it was truly eye-opening to interact with such a diverse group of like-minded folks. I got a ton out of this working group that I can show off to my organization and take credit for. But I also met some knowledgeable characters, including Joe Daly, that provide a unique perspective, which was actually pretty incredible. So I'd recommend anyone here today that's on the fence of joining a working group or just, hopping on the breakout rooms following this, to just do it. Jump in, share a little, but you'll probably learn a lot. And I think that was the biggest takeaway. So yeah, next slide, please. Now you've all heard my story. We'd love to share more with you all. And we actually have a reducing waste breakout room that's going to be following this, where we have members from the working group that represent Azure, GCP, and AWS. And we're happy to share our reducing waste stories with you and show off our project and on the website. So thank you all.
Thank you, Michael. I didn't expect so much of a testimonial and case study for working group. I appreciate that. Because what I was going to say actually is, listening to this, that I love about what the working groups are doing. You all have either bought software from vendors or worked at vendors, and the stories that typically come out are case studies, right? They're like, this amazing thing happened and
Right.
everything was great and we saved all this money. The cool thing about what this group and the others are doing is, yes, they're telling some wins, but we're also seeing some challenges come out where people kind of failed. And we want to hear those as much as anything, right? Which is the real world failings, the real world challenges, because it all is, sunshine and roses. So thanks, Mike. If I can ask you, Mike, just for the partly selfish for our own reasons, but also for the others in working groups, what didn't work to that topic in the working group? Like how could the process have been more efficient? Like too many cooks in the kitchen, not enough focus on where you're going. Like how do we get this better next time?
I think keeping the group small. So like I said, each week was about 15 to 20 participants. And so that really helped. And what I could have done better myself, and I thought, is just interacted more, where a lot of the group did interact a ton and were there every week and were sharing throughout the Slack. I wish I participated more. I didn't see too many failures, but maybe in a month from now, I'll give you a better answer.
And what do you think the group is going to tackle next?
That we are not sure. I am personally not sure of. But I know we're going to be going with there was an index that I'm looking at the website now, and we fall with under the I forget. I'm not sure, so I apologize, JR.
No worries. That's great. Thanks, Mike, for the time. This is that site there. Please go check it out and contribute stories to it when you've got a chance, good, bad, or otherwise. Awesome. I have a second laptop here so I can track things, and I keep trying to move my mouse to it and getting confused, and I realize they're actually different machines. So if you see me looking over there confusing, that's why. Whew. All right. Well, we got through a lot of content faster than expected. Thank you, everybody. This is going to give us a lot of good room in the breakouts to deep dive on all these topics. We've asked each of the speakers to prep a little bit, share a little bit more for conversation. And before we jump over to those, want to bring in our fearless framework leader, Vasilio Markanastasakis, to talk about the FinOps framework and how this is all coming together and where it's going.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, JR. And I think, Mike, your presentation about your working group is a great segue into the framework. Also, I just want to let you know that thanks to you, we now have an official name for our softball team, the FinOps Fanatics. I feel you nailed it. So I'm also going to invite you to join. You seem pretty athletic. And if you look at the rest of us, obviously, we're not going to do well. So having said that, let's talk about the framework really quick. For folks that are new or maybe haven't joined past calls, let's do a quick recap. What is our goals here? What have we been working on? Well, our mission here at the FinOps Foundation is to empower and enable the community. And with that in mind, we are trying to formalize the framework information architecture, make it easy for you to come in and find the information that you need. As you saw from the great presentation earlier about adopting FinOps, the kind of useful real world resources that our community members can use. We want to establish concepts, definitions, activities, and of course, create a library of resources so that once you get past sort of getting comfortable with what FinOps is, how will you apply it? And I think, for folks that have been doing FinOps, the one thing that we've all realized is FinOps is very much based on the context of your business. And so there's really no one way of doing it that's right for everybody. And so our goal here is to try and provide as many resources as possible. This work is ongoing, and this is mostly because we're looking for input from the community to help solidify this framework and evolve it. Next slide, JR. So having said that, one back. Having said that, what are we going to focus on next? We are focusing on capabilities. And what is a capability? Jared, do you mind going back to the one previous slide? What is a FinOps? One back.
I'm on the defining capability slide. There may be a little lag. Is that the right one?
Yeah, just the one previous.
Before that, okay.
Yeah. Perfect. So again, for the folks that are just new, what is a FinOps capability and what are we focused on next? So for the framework, what we're looking, you've heard throughout the presentation so far, whether it was in the great presentation from the Google folks, this notion of a capability. And one of the things that we're going to focus on next in terms of building out the framework are FinOps capabilities. Capabilities effectively represent those functional activities that you're either doing as a team or you're looking for in terms of a platform vendor. And so what we've done is, in order to kind of help guide the process of defining these capabilities, is we set up a template and we've kind of established a structure of what we think a FinOps capability should look like. And as JR mentioned earlier, it includes things like measures of success. I noticed there was some questions in the chat around, what KPIs we should be looking for. It includes things like maturity assessments. And again, because a lot of the work that you'll be doing as FinOps practitioners is very much dependent on the context of your organization. So JR, if you mind going to the next slide. So let's head over to FinOps.org and take a look at what the framework looks like. And JR, is it okay if I just share my screen? Yeah, cool.
Gotcha. Should be all set.
Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right. Now, before we jump in, I just want to take a moment to just reiterate something JR said at the beginning of our webinar, which is the FinOps Foundation solar system.
Hey, I'm so chuffed that you're using that slide that I didn't show to anybody and that I thought you guys were going to be okay with. So thanks for that.
I love it because it really speaks to sort of connecting projects and working groups back to the framework. We're not kidding when we say we want the framework to be community driven. I mean, we're here to enable practitioners, and it's only through conversation and contributions that we're going to do that. And so as you saw, through the Adopting FinOps presentation, as you saw through the Reducing Waste presentation, these items will now feed into the framework. And I'll give you an example of that. So the framework, when we talk about the framework, while we look at the FinOps website as a whole, we're going to focus right now really just on this section. And so if we're going to connect projects and working groups back to the framework and take the amazing work that our community members are doing, you'll notice that our personas page has built out. We define the personas, but now that working group's output and the great content they've developed, as Ashley mentioned in her presentation, is now part of the framework as those cards, those baseball cards as she called them, which I really love that term. And then taking a step further, if we're going to navigate through the framework, we're going to look at the maturity model. Somebody asked, how do we know whether we are in a crawl, walk, run, and how do we assess it? Well, what we're trying to do is establish sort of what is the framework, what is the FinOps maturity model, and provide a few characteristics of maturity. Now, keep in mind, every time we look at a capability, it's going to be through the lens of your organization, and your maturity and where you are in the life cycle of FinOps will be unique to you. So what we're trying to do is create that platform, that framework, pardon the pun, literally, where you can come in here and kind of find the resources you need, but also help yourself assess what you want to do next in terms of your priorities. Now, one thing we skipped over are FinOps domains in our conversation. We talked about that in a past meeting, but FinOps domains represent the larger spheres of knowledge inside which capabilities reside. And as I mentioned just before starting my screen share, this is where we want to focus next, is on these capabilities and building content for them. Now, the framework all comes together. If you look at the website, we have a handy poster which kind of represents sort of a consolidation of all these different concepts and how they fit together. On the left, you have the phases and the different life cycle states that you'll be in, the principles that we just saw, the personas that we just saw, and of course, at the bottom, what we're really going to be focusing on the next few weeks is building out those capabilities which reside inside of domains. So having said that, how do you contribute? Well, one way that you can contribute is you can come to the FinOps.org website, look at the capabilities, and we have tagged or labeled capabilities that still we require help with from the community. And a great example of that would be something like everyone's favorite topic, commitment-based discounts and managing those, RIs, savings plans, committed use discounts. If you click in here, you'll notice a banner. And this banner, what you'll see here is a button that'll allow you to submit your thoughts on what a definition could be, what a maturity assessment could be in the context of crawl, walk, run, functional activities, measures of success, and of course, real world stories, if you could share any with us. And the reason why I picked this one is just more of as an example. If you notice, there's a few on the website that are labeled as help define. And what happens when you click on that contribute button is you'll get a Google form. We make it nice and easy for folks that would like to submit a suggestion, or maybe they have a definition or like to share a story. You can do it through this channel. For folks that are GitHub friendly, we also have an option. You can come into GitHub, the framework repository. We have a special project here called Community Contributions Wanted. And if you click into this project, what you'll see is all the framework capabilities that are either completed, being worked on, or are available for contribution. And you can come in and self-assign one. You can start working on one. You can create a branch and work through GitHub as well. And then the last thing I just want to round out the conversation, which is just to connect back to, if you're ever wondering about what working groups are happening or what special interest groups are ongoing, you can come into the project section just underneath the framework and look at the overview. And you can see, for example, some of the working groups that we talked about today are on this website. Reducing waste, for example, adopting FinOps is here. And then, of course, you can always submit ideas through the contribution button that I showed you earlier, as well as, sorry, I'm just going to move my Zoom control, as well as the how to contribute link as on the website. So if you have ideas for working groups or projects, feel free to come in here and suggest them. JR, I'm going to hand this back to you. There's a couple of slides I just want to round out the conversation with. So having said all that, we teed up, how to contribute. We teed up how we're connecting projects and working groups back to the framework. And on the heels of Mike Martin's awesome presentation, we're going to, if you just skip ahead, we're going to kick off a new working group. Oh, maybe back, sorry, back. My bad.
These are different countries, always fun.
Right there, yeah. We're going to kick off a new working group. We're going to work on resource utilization right sizing. Mike hinted at this in his set of slides. It was his last slide, just emphasizing that for folks who want to help define this capability, please join the working group Reducing Waste Slack channel and raise your hands. And we'll add you to the working doc, and we'll spin up a new instance of a working group for defining this particular capability. And I think that's it, JR. We covered contributions, which I think are the next two slides as we saw. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting based on our conversations?
No, just a little color to add context. I think a lot of people are scared to contribute. And I see this in Slack because when we started with 26 people in Slack, it was less scary. We really want contributions at every level, and there's no wrong answers in FinOps, really, mostly. So, please jump in, contribute, no matter if you're in crawl, walk, or run. If you have questions, sometimes the pre-crawl people have the best questions that the runners forget. Like the runners can forget how important it is to think about that basic tag strategy when they're automating all this stuff with infrastructure with code and yada, yada, yada. So please jump into your questions. The other thing is we have found that there really is a ton of interest for figuring out how to build the culture, the community, and those areas. We are working through the capabilities, and there's gonna be a lot more of these coming, but if there's a working group that you don't see that you wanna kick off, go to that projects overview that Baz showed. Send us an idea and we're happy to get it going. Last thing I'll say on working groups is they must be practitioner led. We have a three-legged stool of practitioners, technology vendors, and consultants, and adopting man, it already feels late in the day when you get up this early. Adopting FinOps working group was a great mix of all those. But as we saw, Ashley, leads that. For example, as a practitioner. So we do want a practitioner to lead those and bring in the vendors alongside to support them as part of that so we get everybody's inputs. And hat tip also back to Jason Fuller. I didn't mention, Jason was one of the original 3 board members of the FinOps Foundation when we formed it in 2019. And it was his thought that said a couple things. He brought us crawl, walk, run. But the other thing he said early on was we got to get vendors in here. We can't just have practitioners talking in a vacuum. We need to have the Accentures and Deloittes and McKinseys of the world so that when we go to talk to them, we're speaking the same language. So our idea is to bring that all together into one place.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks for tying that up. And I just want to take a moment to emphasize exactly what you said. All of us who are working at the FinOps Foundation and all the folks you've heard from today, we didn't wake up experts in FinOps. A lot of our knowledge came through conversations. Slack is a place to do that. Don't be afraid to start a conversation. We're building tribal knowledge and we're all learning together.
Thanks, Vaz. And yeah, thank you for everybody in the community for the work there. So I'm going to pass next to Stacy Case, our leader of operations and trainings and all the things, to talk about both education and get us into the breakouts.
Yes.
I'll share screen there again. I just want to put the names up.
Perfect. I love that. Yeah, so I just assigned everybody to breakout rooms, by the way, once this is over. So let's cross our fingers that the leaders are really scheduled to the right rooms. But we'll talk about that in a second. So education, a couple of really exciting things if you want to just go ahead and advance. We are just a few people shy of hitting our 1,000th FinOps certified practitioner. This is huge. We started the year with just a couple of hundred. We're not even done with the year and we're almost at 1,000, and we really want to celebrate this milestone. So for those of you that have just been hanging out, maybe you bought the self-paced training and you haven't taken the practitioner exam yet, or you have been thinking about taking the exam or getting the training, now is the time to do that. Whoever is the 1,000th person to become FinOps certified practitioner, we're definitely going to celebrate you. We will give you some nifty swag and some credit to some future trainings that we're developing. It's a really exciting thing. I know that I'm super proud of this milestone. I can't thank Rob Martin enough for all of his contribution with all of the education that he's been developing and the certification process itself, along with every one of our practitioners that have helped out. So if you've been if you've been on the fence, now is the time. We're going to make it even easier for you. We're running a promotion for the self-paced training through October 25th, and you're going to get 20% off. So if you go to the FinOps.org training-certification, just put in the discount code October F2, and that's going to apply 20% off of that self-paced training. For those of you that are in Slack, I dropped a direct link to that in Slack, and I'll post it again. A couple of upcoming virtual instructor-led trainings for the rest of the year. We have one next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. It's a little bit later for folks, so this might be really good if you are located on the West Coast or someplace in APAC. This might be a better training for you to attend. Followed by a very early training for me a month later, and then one in December as well. So please check these out if you've been wanting to sign up. We have limited spots for next week, but we do still have a couple spots open, so I encourage you to jump out there. All right.
I'm going to throw it back out there despite my video. I am not yet FinOps certified, but I'm going to get FinOps certified this month. And I commit to posting or sharing my score. And I challenge the rest of you to do so as well when we come back next time.
Very excited about this. Also, folks, if you have been doing FinOps for a while, you can go to our website. You can purchase just the exam as well. You don't have to take the training, although I would encourage folks that are unsure to purchase the training. It's not much more. Okay, we have some really great future upcoming events going on. Remember, we always post these on our events page as well as in Slack. So if you want to keep up to date on all the upcoming events, October 21st is a busy day. We've got some stuff going on with Harness, with a webinar that's coming up, along with Cloud Zero has a virtual coffee break. This is going to be awesome. October 26th. It's also a busy day, folks. We have Stormforge is got a presentation going on, a webinar going on, and also New York City FinOps meetup. This is virtual, so even if you're not in New York City, this is a great opportunity. I know that's a really good group of people to join, so I highly encourage that. As well as following that, the next week is the November 4th London virtual meetup, which includes a couple additional speakers from AstraZeneca, which is pretty cool. Also, put it down in your diaries now, your notebooks now. We have FinOps rounding off the year for November 8th and December 9th. We're going to finish this year with a boom with FinOps. So very excited about that for the different summits that are coming up.